Thanks for joining me on episode 599 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Joe Saul-Sehy from the Stacking Benjamins podcast. I encourage you to find ways to be inspired to find financial freedom. And one way I do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Materer.
See, the purpose, the reason why you do something also drives towards your determination to complete that something. Having a clear, defined why helps you actually achieve your goals. If all you have is goals, you often will bounce from goal to goal.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about investing in yourself through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about what a goal really is and what it looks like, why a goal isn't the same thing as your why or your purpose, and why you should actually spend more time identifying the purpose instead of just the goal. But we often do the opposite.
You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast.
On this podcast, we've talked a lot about goals and how important goals are to getting things done. And I don't argue that they aren't important. You know, we've talked about what a goal looks like, how it has to be specific, measurable, time-bound, all of these things, relevant, the smarter goal framework. All of these are things that I've talked about before in earlier episodes. But stepping back a moment and thinking about what it is that makes up a goal, what does a goal mean? And is it enough? And I would argue that if all you have is goals, you probably don't really have enough. In fact, you probably aren't going to actually achieve all of those goals as easily or as smoothly or as competently as you could without also having something else. So, the dictionary defines a goal as the result or achievement towards which effort is directed. It's the aim. It's the end result. See, I think it's important to recognize that goals have a beginning and a middle and an end. You can know when you have achieved a goal. There's a clear model to it. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end to a goal. You can check it off on a list and you can say, I have finished all of the different tasks that make up this big goal. It doesn't matter whether it's a short-term goal or a long-term goal. It's the items that you put on a bucket list, so to speak. It's, I've gone to Disney. That was a bucket list item. Those sorts of things. But there's another word that's sometimes used interchangeably by people. Sometimes people say and use this word as if it means the same thing as a goal, and that's purpose. But I would argue that a purpose is actually distinctly different than a goal. A purpose is the reason behind something. It's the reason why somebody is doing something. It's the why behind the goal. It's the reason for which something exists or is done, why it's used, why it's made, whatever it is. We use it interchangeably. In fact, the second definition for it is goal, but that's not all it means. And then the third definition for purpose is determination and resoluteness. And I think that's important to recognize. If the first reason is the reason, that's the first definition, and the result or goal is a secondary definition, and determination is a third definition, a tertiary one, then it's important to recognize something. See, the purpose, the reason why you do something also drives towards your determination to complete that something. Having a clear, defined why helps you actually achieve your goals. If all you have is goals, you often will bounce from goal to goal, and you won't ever really stick through to the end. Also, sometimes what happens is you get frustrated because you change goals a lot, but you don't really have a clear reason or direction that you're heading in. This is why I would argue that the purpose is in some ways more important than the goal. The emotional reason, the thing that you want to get out of the goal is more important than the goal itself. As an example, oftentimes people will talk about financially, a goal that they have is to get out of debt. And they'll say that that's their purpose. Their purpose is to get out of debt. But the truth is, that's not their purpose. That is a goal. The purpose is often that they want freedom. They want flexibility. They want to be able to do things with their money that right now they're not able to do because they're trapped in debt. They want to provide security for their family. They want to be able to relax and not be stressed out and worried. Those emotional things are the purpose. Describing it as having a sense of freedom is the purpose. And here's what's interesting. You can often begin to gain some of that purpose, some of that emotion, some of that freedom before you've completed the goal. And in fact, there might be dozens of goals that would get you to that end result, that idea of financial freedom. There's a lot of different ways you can go about getting there. And the way that you do it might be different between one person and the next person. Getting out of debt may be part of it. It may be one step along the way, but it's not the end destination. And if you tune in and recognize that larger purpose behind your goals, then oftentimes you begin to broaden your mind and look at ways that you can do things to even begin getting some of that feeling today without having to finish the goal. It helps you stick to the goal when things get tough. It helps you pivot if you need to pivot. It helps you break out of the linear thinking of my life is nothing but doing point A, then point B, then point C, and recognize the more important things, the deeper purposes behind what you do. And as you do that, then the goals become easier. But the truth is, what we often do instead is we focus 100% of our energy on coming up with the goals, the next resolution, the next thing that we need to do, the next task that we need to put on our to-do list. And I'll be honest, I do the same thing. It's easy for me to fill up a list of tasks. It's harder for me to spend the time and the emotional energy developing the deeper purpose behind why I want to do those tasks. But I will tell you, whenever folks do that, when they spend the time and the energy to do that, then they really begin to put goals on their list that have meaning. They put goals on their list that even though they may be harder than anything they've ever done before, they end up following through and completing, and they really change their life. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.